thank you all for coming to this virtual panel. We're still in strange times, right? So to keep getting on your computers, to attend a book event on a weekend, no less, is always appreciated. And we thank you so much for your support. And also Bookstore Romance Day. How exciting. I think this is what, the second one or third one? I can't remember. What is time anymore? So it's nice to finally be able to get together with romance authors and romance readers and talk the books that we love to read. I'm Amanda. I'm a bookseller at Belmont Books, which is an independent bookstore in the greater Boston area. I'm also a reviewer and writer for Smart Bitches Trashy Books. If you're familiar with the website, it's been around for 14 years, which is probably ancient in internet times. But it's just a romance novel review website, so feel free to check it out. There's a weekly podcast, and I also do romance things around the internet. And joining us today, we have 4 wonderful authors. I am so excited to talk to all 4 of them. We're going to be focusing on food, which is, I think, everybody's favorite topic. I will introduce them all. They will talk a little bit about the books that are out now or upcoming, and then we'll chat. And then we'll have Q&A. So if you have questions for any of the authors, there's a little Q&A bar at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a speech bubble. You can pop your questions in there so it doesn't get lost in the chat. And feel free to chat in the chat function as well. We're not super strict about it. But let's kick things off with Sonali Dev. If you haven't seen Sonali on a panel, I will say she is an absolute delight. So if you haven't seen her, you are in for such a treat today. But Sonali is a USA Today best-selling author who writes Bollywood-style love stories that explore issues faced by women around the world. Her novels have been on many Best Books of the Year lists. She's won several awards. And Shelf Awareness calls her not only one of the best, but one of the bravest romance novelists working today. She lives in Chicagoland with her husband, 2 visiting adult children, and the world's most perfect dog. I think Sonali's recent release is Incense and Sensibility, but she has another adaptation coming up. Sonali, if you want to tell us about those real quick.
So yeah, I think I'm going to switch my bio to treat on panels.
Do it.
All right, so Incense and Sensibility. Thank you, Amanda, first, and I'm so excited to be here. Incense and Sensibility came out in July, and to no one's surprise is a retelling of Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, and sits within this series I have that is my 4 favorite Jane Austen novels: Pride, Prejudice and Other Flavors, Recipe for Persuasion, Incense and Sensibility. And the Emma Project, we have a title, comes out May next year, and it's basically this politically ambitious Indian American family in the Bay Area, and the 4 books are set during their oldest son's gubernatorial campaign, so gubernatorial run for California. And I was going to say gubernatorial run for California governor. Anyway, so that's what gubernatorial runs usually are. But yeah, so it is a story about making home in a new place, families with no boundaries, finding your place in a family where everyone is a star. All my favorite things about being Indian: parents who don't understand what privacy means, all those things. But so they're fun, intensely romantic books, and the first 2 are very foodie, because one of the 2 protagonists is a chef. But I know we'll come back and talk about that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then next up we have Farah Heron, who is also amazing. Done a few panels with Farah. I believe her most recent book, Accidentally Engaged, was also a staff pick at the bookstore. And I think it's for anyone who took up baking or sourdough starters in the middle of the pandemic, personally. After childhood raised on Bollywood, Monty Python, and Jane Austen, Farah wove complicated story arcs and uplifting happily ever afters in her daydreams while pursuing careers in human resources and psychology. She started writing those stories down a few years ago and never looked back. She writes romantic comedies and women's fiction full of huge South Asian families, delectable food, and most importantly, brown people falling stupidly in love. She lives in Toronto with her husband, 2 children, 2 cats, and a rabbit named Strawberry. Accidentally Engaged is available now, and her upcoming romance, Camilla Knows Best, will be available in spring of 2022. And there's also a YA debut coming out later this year. Farah, would you like to tell us about your books?
Yes, thank you for that amazing introduction. So Accidentally Engaged is this one, and it came out in March, and yeah, exactly what Amanda said. It's about baking, and it's about brown people falling in love. Basically, it's a story about all the things that Sonali said her books are about. Meddling Indian families, people in your face all the time, all those lovely things. Sonali's a big influence on me, so thank you for that. So that book came out then, and then also, and I'm really going to try hard not to fangirl and make you think I'm obsessed with Sonali, but I also have an Emma retelling coming out next year. Camilla Knows Best is coming out in March of next year, and it is also a South Asian Emma retelling, and I swear I didn't know Sonali was doing that when I wrote mine. But it's about wild parties, and it's about a really fun-loving heroine that just loves people and loves to have her friends around her all the time, and there's tons of dogs in it. And I'm really excited for when that one comes out because, like I said, there's tons of dogs. Basically, when I was writing it, whenever I got stuck, I would add another puppy. So I think I wrote it during the pandemic, so I think we all kind of needed that self-care dog thing. But my next book coming out is Tahira in Bloom, which is this one, and this is my YA debut, and it's about fashion and flowers. Surprisingly, it's not about food. So it's about a teen fashion designer who is trying to make it big, but plans fall apart for her, and she ends up stuck in a tiny little town for a summer where she learns about flower arranging and she falls in love. So I'm really excited. That's coming out in November 1st. And that's me.
So we're going to move on to Anita Kelly, who is a debut author. We are so excited for their debut coming out in January. So everyone please welcome Anita to panels and virtual events. I'm sure they will be doing a lot of them soon. If not, Estelle, her publicist, hit me up. We can, we can arrange something so she does more of them. So originally from a small town in the Pocono Mountains, Anita Kelly currently makes her home in the Pacific Northwest with her wife and son. A librarian by day, she writes romance that celebrates queer love and all its infinite possibilities. Whenever she's not reading or writing, she's dreaming of the woods, contemplating her next tattoo, and drinking too much tea. She hopes you all get to pet a dog today. Love and Other Disasters, her rom-com debut, is available on January 18th, 2022. And everyone, if you haven't peeped the cover of this book yet, it is so cute and so gorgeous. It's an illustrated cover. The artwork is amazing. I think it's great. So I hope you all get to take a look at it. But Anita, tell us about Love and Other Disasters.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I agree. I feel very lucky about my cover. I gasped when I saw it. I don't have galleys yet, so I can't show you in person, but you can Google it. Yeah, so Love and Other Disasters takes place on a cooking competition show, very much modeled after MasterChef. And it is the love stories between 2 contestants on it. Dahlia, who is a queer woman, and London, who is a non-binary person. And they both come to the show with very different goals. Of course, falling in love is not one of them, but only one of them can actually win. So yeah, a lot of the book is about queerness and falling in love, but also family dynamics. There's a lot of family dynamics going on with both Dahlia and London, and of course, food and empowerment through food and cooking. And while we're waiting for that one to come out, it does come out January 18th, 2022. I also have a series of novellas that are out similar to what Farah was saying, I just kind of wrote for fun during the pandemic, and they all take place at a queer karaoke bar. So those are all kind of about queerness and music and community. And the first one is called Sing Anyway, which is out now. That's me.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, and Suzanne's trying to show an
Too, but
image of
my
it.
camera's not so good. Can you see? It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm loving like the hair and the like clothes and just like the looks.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, Dahlia's big hair is like a big part of the book. And so I was really happy when I saw like, oh, it's her hair, it's right.
As a fellow big-haired woman, I understand. And lastly, we're going to move on to Suzanne Park, who we've done a few panels with already for, I believe, 2 of their YA books. So we're huge fans of Suzanne. Suzanne is a Korean American writer who was born and raised in Tennessee. As a comedian, she was selected to appear on BET's Coming to the Stage. She's also the winner of the Seattle Ceramist Comedy Competition and a semifinalist in NBC's Stand Up for Diversity Showcase in San Francisco. She graduated from Columbia University and received an MBA from UCLA. She currently resides in Los Angeles with her husband, female offspring, and a sneaky rat that creeps around on her back patio. In her spare times, she procrastinates. Love at First Sight was her adult debut, and I think this is your second adult one, which is So We'll Meet Again, right, Suzanne?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and for anyone who's keeping up with our staff picks on the website or our local, So We Meet Again, I believe is going to be a September staff pick. So we hope, an extra nudge to get the book and give it a read. All right, so tell us about it, Suzanne.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
So that's So We Meet Again, and it's part coming of age, part romance / love story, part foodie fiction. And it follows Jessie Kim, who is an overworked investment banker. And she is laid off on Zoom and decides to move back home to Nashville, where she's from, and move back in with her parents into her old childhood bedroom. And while she's there, while she's shopping, she runs into her childhood nemesis. His name is Daniel Choi. And he's Mr. Perfect in her mind. And she can't believe that when she's at her ultimate low, she runs into this guy. But while she's home, she has to decide what she wants to do with her career. So she ends up starting a Korean cooking show, a Korean fusion show. And while she is, live, her mom does a walk-on cameo, and the show takes off. So it's a fun book, and I wrote it all in the pandemic. So you'll see little nods to things that are very pandemic-esque. So you have meal kits, which was the inspiration for this whole idea of her hacking meal kits with more Asian flavors so that you can actually use these meal kits for a longer time. And, there's like food, grocery delivery. There's just a lot of things that were just happening in real life that I pulled into the book, including Zoom. So
I will say with like food delivery during the pandemic, I feel like a bridge troll in that like I'm just like leave the food on the porch, and then like after they leave I like creep out in my sweatpants to like gather the food and like go back inside.
my daughter has watched us like look through the peephole and now she's picked up our behavior, and it's super embarrassing because it's like I think they've left, and I'm like, oh no. She's like this middle schooler that is now learning our creepy habits of peering out through the peephole and seeing if we've left or not. So so that's the pandemic life. Anyway, thank you for having me.
Well, of course. So in terms of just pandemic life and comfort food and comfort reading, I want to know, what is your go-to favorite comfort food to have to just like feel like cozy and secure and something that like uplifts you? We'll start with Anita first.
Oh, ice cream. I'm an ice cream fanatic for better or for worse.
Is there like a flavor or like a go-to? Like, are you a Ben and Jerry's stan or like Haagen-Dazs? What are we talking here?
I am kind of a Ben and Jerry's stan because I like just lots of junk in my ice cream. Although my favorite flavor is Haagen-Dazs's peanut butter chocolate. It's just like huge ripples of like just plain peanut butter. It's so good. But yeah, but comfort food actually is a big part of Love and Other Disasters, and the two characters have arguments about their favorite comfort foods and what is a comfort food or not. So yes.
If you haven't tried the Ben and Jerry's mint chocolate chip, they're like vegan. I think it's like vegan flavor with sunflower oil. I'm not vegan, but it is the creamiest consistency I've ever had in an ice cream. It is very good. So if you're looking to try something new, I highly recommend that one. Sonali, what about you?
Oh my gosh, you want me to pick one?
Maybe two. You can have two if you want.
Well, I weirdly enough will eat ice cream if it has chocolate in it, because I want to eat the chocolate. That's what I've realized. Ice cream, but comfort food, I think. So there's this really simple thing that I grew up with that is very specific to this part of India that I'm from, and it's basically boiled lentils and rice with a lot of ghee, and which is clarified butter, and salt and fresh lime, and that's it, like nothing else. And just something about it is magic. It's magic. And it's the simplest. And I think if you haven't grown up with it and you eat it, like even if you're Indian, you're like, what is this? But it's just, which is how I feel about mac and cheese, like the Kraft mac and cheese. I'm like, why are we eating like salt, cheese, and pasta? But but so it's like that. It's just lentils, rice, with like 3 things in it, which just somehow makes me feel like I'm home and makes everything about the world okay. And then the flip side of that is biryani. You cannot, like, if I could have had a full meal, like I could be full of here, and you pull out biryani and I'm going to eat it. So biryani is my like superstar food. Like I just feel like life is good. Right? So, it's like, it's something about it just is so complete in terms of flavor and in terms of just how humans are supposed to eat.
I was like, yes.
Yes.
Something about that is, I mean, just everything, the level of spice, the texture of meat, what rice does in your mouth. It's magic. It's magic.
I'm right there with you.
I was like, yes.
Yes.
If you haven't seen the latest in deplorable food crimes that have happened, Kraft Dinner in Canada that makes mac and cheese has started new flavor packets for your mac and cheese, one of which is cotton candy, which flavors your mac and cheese cotton candy and turns it bright pink. So, Farah, you might need to answer for those food crimes. You're the Canadian.
Being Canadian, I haven't actually seen the pink Kraft Dinner on, well, in Canada, we call it Kraft Dinner, not Kraft mac and cheese. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about. So I haven't actually seen the pink Kraft Dinner on the shelves yet, but you know what I did get, and I don't know if this is just a Canadian thing, but they have Cheetos mac and cheese here. We bought the box of the regular Cheetos and then what's the really hot one? The Cheetos.
Is it like Flamin'?
The flaming, yeah, the Cheetos flaming hot flavor of mac and cheese. So we haven't tried the flaming hot one yet, but the regular one tastes like Cheetos more than it tastes like mac and cheese. And it's even, yeah. It's not a bad thing. No, it's not. I wouldn't eat it as a meal, but for like when you would normally eat Cheetos and you want to make a
you
box
like
of
garnish
instead,
it with like little Cheetos on top.
that would be good. A little Cheetos garnish on the
Cheetos
mac and cheese.
Or eat the Cheetos and throw away the mac and cheese.
Just eat the powder.
Eat the Cheetos. Farah, what is your comfort food?
So I'm in agreement that biryani is the perfect food, and it's funny the book I was talking about. What's going on with my sound? Camila Knows Best. They have in that book they have a weekly biryani party, so I got to try out all these different kinds of biryani because they're doing a different type of biryani each week. And so I'm really excited about that book because I think we're just going to eat biryani when I'm promoting it, and that's the biryani book. So biryani is one of those foods that I could literally eat every day and not get bored of it. Which is also one of those foods that I'm incapable of making a small quantity. I always end up making too much biryani, which is never too much because there's 4 of us in the house, and it's still, I'm like in a day, like where did all that biryani go? Like it was like a bucket full. So that's definitely up there for comfort food. I grew up with mac and cheese as my comfort food. When I was a kid and I was a picky eater, my mom would just make macaroni. So that's still kind of the thing that when I'm feeling really yucky that I want, like whether it's the box stuff or scratch made. But I think real comfort food is anything my mom made. My parents haven't lived in the same country as me since I was like 19. So I don't get her food very often. So I think just my mom's cooking is my comfort food.
Suzanne, what would you pick?
Well, I was going to say cotton candy mac and cheese.
And then we just shit all over it.
Mock it. So I'll go with my second favorite. So actually the comfort food of choice is actually in this book, the recipe. It's kimchi fried rice. And I believe because of the biryani talk, it is, it's the rice, the savory flavors. Maybe there's something to that. Because it's one of the few dishes that is easy to make and I can make it pretty, well quickly. And I think there's something about being able to just whip it together and then sit down to nice, warm, comforting rice dish that I really enjoy. The other thing I would say during the pandemic, I was baking a lot of chocolate chip cookies. So I would have to say that possibly to balance the savory, there is that sweet thing. And I was like on a quest to figure out how to make it just better, like with each time, just by tweaking things. Like, do I make it more salty? Do I add more egg or whatever? And I didn't really find the best formula. I think I need to try brown whatever.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned fried rice. That is my comfort food. There's this, I think, Thai place that puts like Taiwanese sausage, like really crispy Taiwanese sausage in their fried rice. So good. I think for me, comfort food, it's got to be like stick to your ribs sort of food. It like makes you feel full and just so comforting and cozy. I do love ice cream in terms of emotional eating.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking more of.
But afterwards, I feel bad. Like my body feels bad.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a minor comfort.
Yeah.
So there are some connections through what some of you just said with like food and family as a way to like, remember, your family members, your mom. It reminds you of home. I think specifically like Sonali, you mentioned this, and Farah mentions this. And I think even in your book, Suzanne, with your main character and her mom, even though like they kind of have a back and forth relationship, there's still that like connection of food and how like it brings people together, even if maybe their relationship is not the greatest. Or like Anita with 2 competitors, they might be on like opposite sides, but they still have that like shared love of like cooking. What do you think it is about food that kind of like bridges those relationships, whether in terms of like remembering or finding common ground? We'll start with Farah.
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think, like in Accidentally Engaged, the food is definitely how the 2 people came together. And I envisioned it as a cultural thing. Rena's a total foodie and she makes food from all over the world. And she loves baking bread. And so food is a big part of her life. But specifically in the cooking contest that they're entering together, they're together making food from their own culture. It's supposed to be about home cooking. So they're both coming from the same culture, even though they grew up in different places. So that cultural food, it's like what I was saying about my mom's cooking. It's that connection between them, that despite the fact that they're from different places and grew up very differently, they have that culture in common, and the food is kind of how they came together. And I think for a lot of people that it's like food is your taste in food or whatever is not something that's affected by the world outside around you or anything like that. It's just you. If you love rice, that's not something you're being trendy or putting on a front or anything. You just love rice. And I think that's a way to kind of get to know a person's insides by what their food tastes are, because it's pretty, like, it's an internal thing. So that's why I love kind of bringing people together through food.
Anita, what about your characters?
I think for my characters, I mean, there are so many different facets of food. Like you said, I feel like cultural and familial ties to food are really strong. But for both of my characters, I think also going on what Farah said, it's very internal for both of them. Both of them, I think cooking gives them a sense of control that they don't always feel like they have in the real world. So Dahlia is recently divorced and young. She married her high school boyfriend and then divorced him very young. And so she feels like she's kind of lost and needs to restart, being an adult. And so she teaches herself to cook. And it kind of helps her like find herself again. And for London, London has always had trouble, feeling like they belong and figuring out where they are in the world. And so again, like cooking is one thing that they can control and be in charge of what they are creating. And so, yeah, I think for both of them, they both have that shared experience of empowerment through cooking.
It's so interesting that you brought up control, because I think cooking can really be divided in two categories. Like you have cooking, right? Then there's baking. And baking is
right.
much different than cooking, because baking is very controlled and it's a science. You can't really necessarily wing it on the amount of different like baking powder or anything like that, or else it'll be gross.
And that goes with my characters too. Like London is really into baking because they are more about like control and like having rules, whereas Dahlia is kind of messy, and so she likes actual cooking more and like throwing in random spices and like not measuring things, and so that is also like a difference between them.
Suzanne,
I was trying to remember the original question.
I
think I'm lost track of what I'm supposed to talk about.
We were talking about the relationships people have with food.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like repair or build relationships or start a conversation.
Gotcha. So in a lot of Korean families, food and cooking is its own love language and shows love and affection. So it's not, it's very common for family, like mothers, to, keep their kids well fed. And also, like while they're studying, the kids are studying, they'll like cut up fruit and leave it like outside their door on the kitchen table for them to grab. So it's something that I grew up with. And then in the story with Jessie and her mom, her mom keeps a well-stocked fridge. So Jessie's definitely never hungry. And even though they have their challenges with their relationship, when they're actually together and then they're cooking together, it has its own like tradition, but also has them doing something together that's almost like muscle memory for them, because they have she used to help her mom cook when she was younger. And so there's something in the book that I wanted to talk about, which is how certain families might not outwardly show affection by hugging and kissing, but it's through food and cooking, and this way of that's the way that they show affection and care for each other.
Sonali?
It's an endless question, right? I love that control thing, right? What you said, because I love to cook, but baking terrifies me. And it really is about control, because I don't like the idea of mixing things together and then putting them away and then having nothing to do with what comes out of it, right? Except knowing when to pull it out. I'm like, that's preposterous to me. I love eating. I'm like, what am I doing? It's in the oven. The oven's doing stuff that I can't control. But also, I think in terms of just relationships. So I'm also a first generation immigrant. I moved here, when I was 23, and set up a whole life from scratch. Right, we have very, very tightly bonded found family. We literally built everything from scratch, which was one of the reasons why we came. That sense of adventure and going and building something from scratch. um, and something about that was, so much about that was based in food. That is how we pulled people toward us. That is how we tied. It's the ropes with which we tied people up. It's as as a South Asian mother, as an immigrant mother, it's such a part of what I do to my children, right? How I show them affection, how I build them up, how I comfort them, how I teach them to reach out to people. So I had 25 people staying in my house this weekend, and yeah, which is like a pretty standard thing.
Just for
But
fun, or like
yeah, I mean, it was it was like there was a golf tournament, and so everybody came. But our kids are, so this is a bunch of friends. Our kids, we've been together since before our kids came. So it's, the kids have five mothers and five fathers, and that kind of, they feel that kind of bond. And it's very much also a thing about how we know who makes, this is a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, mother-daughter, aunts thing too, where when something is theirs, like they do it really well, you'll instantly, my mother-in-law is incredibly close to her sisters-in-law, and it'll be like, oh, if she's making biryani, I'm not, no, that's a Sheila thing, I won't do it. So you don't, it's this whole lines drawn power, putting people, giving people something to feel good about themselves. Women kind of, it's almost, and between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, there's this whole history of when you're allowed to finally make the, big dish at a meal, like things like that, which sound very cozy and lovely, but which is also bondage, right? Which is ways in which women have been tied up. So I know a lot of women who will not cook because they can now not cook, right? And so as a woman who loves to cook and who has seen her mother be this tremendous cook, it's kind of, I don't want that to define me because it defined my mother, but I love doing it, and I do also want it to define me. So there's this huge amounts of struggle as a woman for me personally that goes with food. And I see it, my mother-in-law and I are incredibly close, but as different as two women can be. But one of the things we do is, when we're cooking, we're both cooks, but she loves to be in the kitchen with me. I don't have to take her out, I don't have to do anything, but she loves being in the kitchen with me when we're doing the, you want to taste this, does this need more salt, do you think this needs more masala, and that whole thing is how we bonded from the beginning of our relationship. And and just her being able to say, this is actually great, this is like better than I make, and all of that kind of, it's such a complicated thing. And I think that's why in stories it's such an important thing, because you can, I mean, it's a language, and it's easy enough device to get people to show love and show anger and show standing up for themselves, all of those things. It's just a brilliant device, but it's real because it's such a part of our real lives.
I think it's interesting that you brought up how it often affects, the relationships between women and kind of like their standings with each other. Two things that it reminded me of is my mom and my grandmother, my late grandmother, so my dad's mom. I'm from the South, so it's just lots of mayonnaise food. But she would make this like macaroni salad that my dad loved, and my mom wanted the recipe, so she would give it to her, and my mom would make it, and it wouldn't taste right, and she'd be like, "Oh, I forgot to add this," and so she'd make it again, like, "Oh yeah, I forgot to write this down, and you need to add this." So she'd always like leave something little out, like teasing out. And she passed away before my mom got the full recipe. So like this amazing macaroni salad is just gone. And then I remembered I made like fried chicken for my dad, and he said it was better than his mom's, which is like the ultimate like compliment you can give someone, is this dish that you made is better than my mother's. So I find that very interesting that you brought that up, Sonali, is that specifically the relationships between moms and daughters or mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws.
And the other side of it is men, right? We use food to be aspirational about heroes, right? I mean, there was you didn't have heroes who cooked even 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It was a big thing, and now almost across the board, heroes in romance novels cook. And I think that that's just how that's a societal thing. That's us, that's us saying that this is, because I think if you trace the history of romance novels, it's what we want in men, right? And hey, I mean, there is nothing, a man who feeds me, there is nothing nothing. Well, there's one thing, but that's different.
Well, Suzanne brought up a good point that it is like a love language, whether it's platonic or romantic, right? Like this person is kind of like caring for you by feeding you because they want you to be fed. And of course, there's also on the reverse side of when you make something and you give it to someone and they enjoy it and they think it's so delicious, like you get that like dopamine hit of like, I'm the best person in the world. And so, yeah, it is a very powerful love language, whether or not love is expressed as directly as some families, or if it's, a more subtle thing. Switching gears a little bit to like a very weird question. If you had to describe yourself as a food or a dish and like give it to someone and be like, this is what Sonali would be if she were a food, or this is what Anita would be if they were a food, what would you pick to describe yourself? I'll go first. I would be nachos. There's a lot going on. There's spicy, there's a little like, pickled vegetable, there's some crunch. And then you get to the bottom and it's just plain because the toppings don't go that far down. So, so I would be nachos. If you needed help with the prompt. Whoever can come up with it first, because I know this is a complicated question.
For some reason, I keep going to desserts and sweet things.
That's fine. Desserts are wonderful.
I feel like like now that I'm getting more feedback on my work, people consistently call my work kind of like soft or general or like gentle, like my writing and my relationships. So I think I would be angel food cake, like something to like soft and light that makes you feel good.
Well, surprisingly that you say soft, angel food cake is difficult to make. So it is an effortless looking dessert.
Yeah.
But it takes some real patience and craftsmanship to get it right. So I think that's a very good dessert to pick.
It does take work to be soft in this world.
It does take work to be soft. I also have like an angel food cake pan and it has like little feet. I don't know if you've ever seen one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're the most bizarre things. When I bought it, I'm like, what the hell is this? Suzanne?
I'll go. Yeah.
The feet like prop it up so the angel food cake slowly sinks and releases from the pan. It's bizarre.
I have never made angel food cake, but it sounds good now. Now I'm
it's
like
delicious.
I'm gonna go with Thai drunken noodles. There's a reason. Because I've eaten so much of it that I probably could turn into it at some point. Literally, this pandemic has been, I'm just one giant drunken noodle. But mainly because you can dial up the spice or have it plain. And I think with at least the writing style that I have, like Loathe at First Sight, this book, my debut, it's much more punchy and, snarky, the humor in it and the main character's voice. And then this one is more of a comfort read. So it's a little bit lighter hearted and lighter on the humor in terms of the edginess. So I feel like, you can dial up or down the punch to the dish, and very easily by adding chilies or taking them out. And that's why I would choose it.
All right, Farah and Sonali, just you two.
Can I say that we're kindred spirits, because I have never met anyone who loves, we call them crazy spicy noodle is what what the place I get it from calls it. But I have a mad love for it. Like I have such a wild love for it that I kind of never have met anyone else. So I'm kind of holding your hands right now. I'd say I could be many foods depending on the day, especially since I'm premenopausal. But but I think biryani, because I want to be comforting. B, you're never. I think people are surprised at what happens when you put it in your mouth, and that's not expecting at all. And I think that's often the case when people either get to know me or even with the books. I'm always getting the I mean it's this, but there's all this going on, and there's always, I think, sometimes too much going on for some people in my books, but there's no such thing for me, and so I think that it's that being surprised by all the things you're going to find, and you're going to find something new every time. But I do feel like if I were a savory dish, I would be biryani.
All right, Farah.
Okay, I love how everybody picks such different things. I think for me, as much as I love Thai drunken noodles and biryani and angel food cake, I'm gonna say that I'm a cheesecake. And similar to what Suzanne said about how you can dial it back, or to me, I think a cheesecake can be super, super fancy, or it can be very kind of plain. But even when it's plain, it's still very good. It's rich, it's sweet. You can have it with lots and lots of different flavors. You can have an apple. Now I really want cheesecake. You can have like a basic cherry cheesecake. You can have like apple cinnamon, maybe Rocky Road. Or it can be very simple. It can be airy, like a Japanese cheesecake. So, but at the base of it, it's just simple cheese, cream, eggs, and it's just simple and delightful. And like I said, now I really want cheesecake. But that's what I would say.
There's like a really simple like icebox cheesecake that I make that's like no baking involved, and you just put everything in a pan and you put it in the fridge to cool for like 6 hours. It's very good. I can send you the recipe if you want. I'm a fan of recipes that don't take a lot of work.
Me too.
Suzanne's like, yes. As a reminder, feel free to submit any questions that you have for these authors in the Q&A portion. Happy to get to them and go over time if we have a lot. If there is a particular author that you have a question for, just feel free to direct the question to them and that'll be fine. So specifically, Farah, Suzanne, and Anita's books feature a competitive or media element to them. Yours says too, Sonali?
Recipe Persuasion is set on a cooking show.
Oh, that's right. So what like cooking media do you consume? Do you have like a favorite cooking show or YouTube channel or like blog or anything? I know Great British Bake Off is a nice, cozy, comforting watch, but are there any particular favorites that you have?
I'll go. I like Great British Bake Off, absolutely. The cooking contest in Engaged was loosely based on one that was on Netflix a while ago, and it was the Home Cooking Showdown. And I really took to, not a lot of people watch it. Most people don't know what I'm talking about, but so it was about families competing against families. So it would be like 3 members of the family, and they'd all be in the studio, 3 members, like 4 teams, and they're all families. And they would cook, they would all have to cook the same thing, and then they'd all have to cook something of like a family favorite. And then they'd go into people's houses and they'd film them cooking in their house. And I just thought that was so cool. And it kind of like bridged the gap between like the studio cooking shows where everything seems very polished and everything, to just being family food in their house. And it was always kind of crazy, and it was so I really like that kind of show. One of the reasons I like it is like Great British Bake Off, there was no competitiveness. In Accidentally Engaged, my characters are on a team together. And then actually, it's not a cooking contest, but in Tahira and Bloom, they're in a flower design contest. And again, they're on a team together. I don't do well with writing people competing. I prefer everybody working together and everybody's on the same team. So those two shows, I would say, Great British Bake Off and the family cooking one.
I think there was also like a flower arranging competition.
There was, yeah.
Show.
That was my inspiration for that. Yeah. And then on YouTube, I really I've been watching a lot of the baking ones on YouTube. I don't remember the guy's name, the preppy baker, I think.
Oh yeah.
He's always wearing like a bow tie, and he's always like very, very well dressed, and he's making amazing looking cakes. And so that's when I'm like really, really stressed. I'll just watch him make buttercream, and I love how he always kind of messes up a bit and just laughs it off and then makes more buttercream.
Suzanne.
I started to watch more shows with my daughter, who's now 11, and so we're watching. I have a very limited amount of free time, so when we watch shows, it's like all of my free time. So we're into Nailed It and Sugar Rush and things like that you can watch that are. But the Nailed It is funny because
yeah, that's great.
When they fail, my daughter is like hysterically laughing and then rewinds the whole thing, like, "Did you see how terrible this is?" And as a part of Nailed It, they did something during the pandemic with Jenny Han's To All the Boys, where they sent you paid money, and then they sent you like a baking kit that had fondant and all the ingredients to make a cake. And then you did a live Zoom with the people who host the show. And it was timed, and it was like a disaster in our kitchen, but that was also a lot of fun. So I highly recommend that and the accompanying cooking part that go with it. As far as like Korean food, there's a woman, her name is Jinju, I believe her name is, but her kind of brand name is Kimchi Mari, and she has recipes that are simple and actually ones that I'm familiar with. Sometimes like they get too fancy with the Korean food, it ends up like more fusion and has like 16,000 ingredients when it could actually be like 5. And she does the simple like home cooking kind of comfort foodie kind of food. And so when people say like who like has, who can I follow or whatever for the Korean food stuff, I always say her. And she has a newsletter, and she sends out great recipes that are, again, just simple and straightforward, and it's just stuff my mom and grandma used to make.
I watch a lot of, and you've probably heard of her, Emily Kim, or like Momchi.
Yes.
Yeah. Her YouTube channel is wonderful. And she's also got some really good cookbooks. So my brother lived in Korea. He went like all in on. He made his own kimchi, like got the pot and everything, and he has become obsessed with making his own kimchi.
I have the cookbooks as well. That's another one. I think that's one of the best cookbooks I've seen.
Yeah, it's really good.
One of her latest ones. Yeah.
Anita, what do you usually watch?
So like I said, Love and Other Disasters was really inspired by MasterChef. So I love MasterChef. But I will give a shout out to a podcast that's called The Sporkful. The tagline is, "It's not for foodies, it's for eaters," which is kind of how I view myself, as an eater more than a foodie, because I'm not a good chef. But it's hosted by this classic New Yorker guy that has this great laugh. And I just really enjoy every single episode because he does a lot of episodes that explore food and culture and things like that. But then he'll also have just really interesting, like informational ones. Like the one I always remember is he had an episode about apples and how different apple varieties come to be. And he had this apple scientist from Washington State University. And I'm like, you can be an apple scientist.
Like, who knew that was a job?
That's this woman's job. And it was really fascinating. But he also, one of my favorite things the podcast does is during the new year, people call in with their food resolutions, and it has to be about a food that you want to eat more of in the coming year. And I think I like that, turning New Year's resolutions on its head, because society and food, it's often an unhealthy association of what can eat less of, and having to eat healthy things. And so I love that idea of what can we eat more of. So yeah, the sporkful is really enjoyable.
Sonali?
Chopped all the way. So it's yes, I think you couldn't find me an episode that's aired that I haven't watched. If it's on, like sometimes it's on all night, I can go nonstop. And I think anything on Food Network, like my husband and I can identify all of the chefs. We know where each one is coming from, and we'll have these ridiculous arguments that if anyone hears us, they're going to think wrong with us, because we're like, but it's Bobby Flay, you know how he's going to do Southwest. Well, there's no way he can make chicken curry.
I feel like Chopped also turns you into like a judge, like, oh, that's undercooked, they're going to be sent home.
Yeah, they're not going to. Yeah, so, and two things are bad. So is like undercooked meat or badly cooked meat going to get them chopped, or leaving out an
ingredient? Or like anytime someone goes to use that ice cream machine, it's a risky move.
Yeah. It's so chopped all the way. And I think a lot of and I'm completely obsessed with Manit Chauhan and everything she does. And yeah, I always say to my husband, if the romance industry had a Manit Chauhan, I would be her. Not because of the accent, because of how I love that her chef's jackets are Zardozi and Ikat, and she does the whole. Her sense of style is very much the accent, the sense of style, like all of it is I totally relate, and I'm so glad I was already me before I got into Manit, because I took off like I was ripping her off otherwise. But she's just flawless. Like her food is flawless, her understanding, her comfort in her own skin, which is something I'm a huge proponent of, is just. And I think I love that across the chefs, and how each chef is has developed over time, and they're so themselves and their culture, and that's through food, we were saying. And so yeah, I absolutely love Food Network. I feel like people used to ask me with Pride, Prejudice and Recipe what research I did, and I said my whole the past 2 decades have been research, with the amount of time I have spent watching. I've done millions of hours of research.
I love binging with Babish on YouTube. He
I like that one too.
He recreates dishes that you see in like movies and TV shows, and he's recently partnered with Sola, who's on Bon Appetit's YouTube channel, and I think it's called Stump Sola, and they spin this like big wheel and give her like this cooking challenge. And I think one, she had to like make mac and cheese with like medieval cooking tools. Or like make a 7-course meal from things you can only get at a bodega. It is so fun, his channel. And seeing like Sola on there is also like really great. You can really tell like how talented she is as a chef, with all of these things, these weird things that she gets, and she just like nails them. So that's.
And I think that the whole Babish channel, like all the other shows, he just started. There's a new one. I don't remember who the guy is. So it's on the Babish channel, where he's traveling through Mexico, going to the little small villages in Mexico and making and like learning the. So it reminds me of back when people could travel, and we had so many of those travel cooking shows. Those were always my favorite. But we haven't seen them in so long because nobody's traveling. So that's a good one too.
Yeah, for Binging with Babish, I was really excited about season 2 of Ted Lasso coming out. So he had like a recipe for like Ted Lasso's biscuits, and so I made them like the Thursday before like season 2 dropped, as like my own little.
How did the cookies turn out?
Good. So I think they were slightly over baked because I didn't hear my timer go off. So that was one thing to change, but he had different versions of like just a plain biscuit, like a brown butter one if you wanted to make it fancier. But all of the stuff like I had in my house already, like this like flour, sugar, butter, and then maybe some vanilla or something. But yeah, I thought they were pretty good, and I bought like the little pink cardboard box and I like took them to work and I got really into it.
Biscuits with the boss.
Yeah, biscuits with the boss. So to wrap up, I want to know what good things you have been reading or watching, and what are some good things that we should check out to bring some joy into our lives? What are things that you want to put on our radar? We'll start with Anita.
So I've read 2 upcoming romance books recently that both of them I like couldn't put down. I read them each in like 24 hours, which is not normal for me. But they're both upcoming books coming out in September, and they're both by debuts. One is called The Charm Offensive by Allison Cochran, which takes place on like a Bachelor-esque reality dating show, but it's queer. And there's a lot of great mental health and neurodivergent rep in there. And then the other one was The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood, which was just like so fun. And again, I couldn't put it down. It was like candy to me. So yeah, but they're both out in September, so definitely pick those up.
I am such a nerd that the minute I saw that cover, I was like, that is my favorite fan artist who does Rey and Kylo Ren fan art.
Yeah.
And I clocked it the moment I saw it. And I'm like, oh God, you need to get off the internet, Amanda.
Well, no, I think that's on purpose, because in the acknowledgments, like she talks about how she writes fanfic of Kylo and Rey, and I was like, oh, okay, it all makes sense. Now.
I liked it. It was really cute.
Yeah.
Sonali.
So I'm on deadline, and I
You're not looking at anything.
I am. I have very late to the game. I started reading the Balikor Jaiswal's erotic stories for Punjabi widows.
Oh yeah,
I just read that this year too.
And I had started it when it first came out, and then I got really busy, and I thought it was delightful back then too, and I'm really enjoying it. But it's not a good idea for me to read a little. Like, I'm the kind of person who likes to start and finish a book, and so it has to be a full-time job. Like, I'm doing nothing else in that book I will read, because I can't put books down. But I'm learning now what to do that with this book. But it's really it's set in Southall, or however you're supposed to say that I always say wrong, even though I've written a character who is from there. And I should have read this as research when I was writing DJ for Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. But it's really funny and poignant and very immersive into that slice of British South Asian culture. So and I love books like that take you deep into an experience, even if that experience is very different from your own. And so I'm really, really enjoying it.
Suzanne.
I'm like Sonali, where I'm in a deadline phase, but I've been.
Because you have like 1 million books coming out in the next like year or two,
which we'll talk about on another panel. But I did get to read like little, I have had reading breaks, so I'm currently reading To Sir Philip with Love in the Bridgerton series for an event I have to do at the end of the month with Avon, and I hadn't actually read much of Julia Quinn, and I'm now a fan. I mean, first of all, this book is like Sound of Music meets the Bride Test from Helen Huang, like mashed together perfectly, but in like, historical. So I'm enjoying that. I'm halfway done. And let's see, other books that I've read. Helen Huang's Heart Principle is coming out soon.
Good.
Early read of that. It's wonderful. It's heartbreaking, hopeful, and it's just a deeply felt book where she just lays it all out there. And then I read a YA book called The K-Pop Revolution by Stefan Kim. And his book is a continuation of his previous book, K-Pop Confidential, where there's an LA-based Korean American singer who is like a closeted singer in terms of just sings in the shower, and then she ends up making the cut to be in the K-pop trials for this big debut, and so you follow her journey. So I really enjoyed that, and that was my most recent read.
Suzanne, did you see that Helen's doing her first ever event?
Yes.
Yes, with the
With
Ripped
Christina
Bodice
Lauren.
and Christina Lauren. I have tickets. So excited.
I have
hope it
tickets
goes
too.
I'm
excited to see
very
her.
excited.
Yes, she's excited too.
Yeah, I think like if any, I think Christina Lauren is a good pairing. They bring some good energy to a panel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine anyone else.
Yeah.
It's going to be fabulous because they're just so
They're wonderful.
honestly kind and comforting. So they're biryani and
Farah, what have you been reading and loving and enjoying right now?
I'm also in
On
deadline. No. So I've been reading, I happen to have it here. I've been reading K.M. Jackson's How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days. And this book is a delight. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It's got a heroine. I love that it has an older heroine. She's in her 40s and she doesn't quite have her life together. And I think that I find that maybe because I'm in my 40s and I feel like I don't have my life together most of the time, I feel that it's not something we see very often. If we have an older heroine, it's like they're always so fabulous and have everything put together and they're totally like independent and everything. And I love that she's just kind of a little bit lost. But the hero is amazing and Keanu Reeves is in it. So as far as I'm concerned, that's enough for me. And then the last book I read before it, which I really, really loved, it's Mona Schroff's new one, which is called The Second First Chance. And it's coming out, I don't remember when it's coming out. But I really, really loved it. It's got a female firefighter, and I love I've never read anything with a female firefighter, and she's tough but soft, and she knows what she wants. And then the hero's a vet, so there's puppies everywhere, which again I love. So it's a great book. I highly recommend it when it comes out. I don't remember when it's coming out. And then I think that's it. I'm reading Anita. I'm reading your book next. So Anita Kelly is next on my to be read list.
I hope you enjoy it.
I'm sure I will. I'm really excited about it.
Those are all some great recs. Also, like for another Keanu-esque with an older heroine, I think it's called Gray Hair Don't Care by Karen Booth. I think that's what it is. You might like that one.
Yeah, I've seen that one around, but it's got a gorgeous cover. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's a really nice cover. But I think that is the end of our Falling for Foodies event for Bookstore Romance Day. Thank you so much to these authors, Farah and Suzanne and Sonali and Anita. It's always a pleasure to talk about these things with all of you. And for everyone who attended, thank you so much. Support your local bookstores, especially if they also support romance readers. The Bookstore Romance Day site has a listing of all of the independent bookstores that are participating. So even if you don't buy a book from Belmont, you can find a local independent bookstore that is in your area that you can support that also stocks and supports romance. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to the authors. If you came in halfway or missed anything, we have recorded the event. It'll be on our YouTube channel, Belmont Books, within a couple days. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you for having
Thank you,
me.
everyone.
You're welcome.